So earlier on in our service, we were thinking about how we felt or how we feel when we go into a new situation. And Joshua, in the verses that we've just read, is on his first day in a new job, the job of leading God's people. The verses started by telling us that Moses is dead, and Joshua is now stepping into his shoes. If you were at Holiday Club earlier in the summer, then you'll remember that we looked at the story of Moses, how God spoke to Moses in the burning bush, how he stood up to Pharaoh in Egypt, how he led the people of Israel out of slavery, how he divided the Red Sea, and how he performed various miracles in the wilderness. But you may also remember, if you were at Holiday Club, that often the people, whenever anything didn't quite go to plan, whenever there was anything that was a little bit hard or a little bit tough, their immediate response was to start moaning and groaning and blaming Moses. But now Moses is dead, and Joshua is about to take his place. And this kind of leading the people of God is a pretty big job. Moses had pretty big shoes or sandals that Joshua was stepping into. And I'm sure that Joshua felt first morning nerves as he started in this role, not least a total sense of inadequacy of being the right person and not being equipped and not being able to do all that God had given him. And so the book of Moses, it starts with this summary. The book of Joshua, starts with this summary. Moses is dead. And then it has verses 2 to 9 are all words that God speaks. And you'll find these verses printed on the right-hand side of the sheet of paper that you have. And what I want you to do is you can do this on your own, or you can do it with a few people around you, but you will need to swap pencils with somebody. So you do actually have to work with somebody, because what I want you to do is I want you to read through those verses, and in one colour in anything that God says he will do, or anything that God has promised. And in the other colour in anything that God tells Joshua or the people to do. Okay, so you're going to have, by the time you've finished, some of it won't be coloured in at all, but then in one colour, you'll have coloured in anything that God says he will do, or anything that God says he has promised, and in the other colour, you will have the words or any instructions that God gives to either Joshua or the people. And if you are small and you'd like to do this with Sue, and you're not already at the back, then now is an opportunity to just make your way at the back, and Sue's going to do that with you at the back. So, when I was looking at this passage to prepare, I thought that was, there is that contrast. And whenever God asks us to do something, there are also certain things that God promises, and it's not just about what we do in our own strength, it's about what God has promised and the things that God will do. And that's very clear in that passage. Now, again, if you were at Holiday Club ended with the people of Israel escaping from Egypt and crossing the Red Sea. And that, if you wanted to look it up later on, is in Exodus chapter 14. And then Joshua begins with the people about to go into the promised land. And from Exodus 14 to Joshua chapter 1 should have only taken 2 or 3 weeks to get from crossing the Red Sea to entering the promised land is a relatively short journey. God has promised to give the land way back in Genesis 12 and Genesis 15. So this is a promise of God that goes back hundreds of years before Moses and Joshua. This journey should have taken them a few weeks, and yet it's taken them 40 years. The reason it's taken them 40 years is because Joshua and Caleb are two people who've been into the promised land before. If you want to look it up, it's in Numbers 13 and Numbers 14. Moses sent 10 spies into the land. They all came back and they said, the people are huge, the grapes are massive, their cities are fortified, the land is flowing with milk and honey. And 8 of the spies kind of made the people shake and think the people are huge, the cities are fortified, we can't possibly do it. Joshua and Caleb both said, of course we can do it because God has promised to give us the land. God will be with us. But the people listened to the 10 rather than Joshua and Caleb. The people, again, they grumbled and they moaned and they complained against God. And so as a consequence, they spent 40 years wandering in the desert. And in that 40 years, every single adult, except for Joshua and Caleb, died. So we're now Joshua chapter 1. Joshua and Caleb are the only people that were there who were adults in Numbers 13 and 14 who are still alive. We've now got the next generation. And the question is, well, are they going to make the same mistake again? It is the first day of term, as it were. They're faced with the unknown. Some of them, no doubt, were excited. Some of them would have been nervous. Some of them would have been anxious. Some of them would have felt a whole range of emotions. And yes, it was true that their enemies were bigger than them, and it is true that their enemies were better equipped than them. But it is also true that God had promised that he would give them the victory. And so what are they going to do? Where are they going to put their trust? Are they going to repeat the mistakes that their parents and their grandparents made? And for many of us, there will be various points in our lives where we enter a new phase. When things change, when routines change, when responsibilities change. So maybe when our children start school, everything looks a little bit different. When we start work, when we get a new role at work, maybe as we get older, we have responsibility for elderly parents. And there are all sorts of stages in our lives where we enter into a new phase where our circumstances change. And it's good at those points to stop and to pause and to reflect and to say, what is God saying to me in this particular moment? And sometimes it can be a fairly scary prospect when we realize what God might be saying to us. But God isn't asking us to do it on our own. Just as God promised to be with Joshua, God has promised that he will be with us too. And so what I thought we would do just for a couple of minutes is there's a little Bible or open book in the bottom left-hand corner. And what I am going to encourage us to do is if anyone has got any promises from God's word that in the past they've found helpful as something that's helped them as they've gone into a new situation, to maybe call those out. And if one of those resonates with you, then you can maybe write that on the pages of that book in the bottom left-hand corner. So in the bottom left-hand corner, we're going to be putting some promises that will help us as maybe we go into a new stage or a new phase of life. So anyone want to shout anything out or wave at me and I could get a microphone to you? Right. Can you say that again, please?
The Lord is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path.
Brilliant. Thank you. So the Lord is a light unto my path and a lamp to my feet. We must. All right, Ken, hang on a minute.
This is Deuteronomy 31, verse 8. The Lord himself goes before you. He will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Mika.
The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Verse 1 of Psalm 27.
Psalm 27, verse 1. Anyone else? So there's a few, and some of you may have got other promises, or you might want to go away later on and to find, maybe you've got one in your head, but you're not quite sure where it comes from. But to write down, because God has promised all sorts of things to us, and it's good to remember those things. Just here, as God was reminding Joshua, it's good to remember those promises that God has made. But it's not all down to God. As you've coloured in on your piece of paper, there are some things that God told Joshua and the people to do. So they're not just sitting by idly while God does it all. They need to take part in this too. And part of it is developing a routine of meditating on the Lord day and night, so that they can be obedient to everything that God is saying. And I don't know about you, but I find that kind of transitions and changes in routine can be points at which some of those things, some of those habits that I do that enable me to get closer to God, when I go into a new phase and a new routine, that can be a bit disruptive. So going into holiday time, when my normal routine just goes up in the air, can be unhelpful because some of those disciplines, some of those routines I have go out the window. You might find that going into the holidays is beneficial because you have a little bit more time, and therefore some of the things that you can't always fit in normally, you've now got the time to do. And so whenever we go into a new phase, whether it be into holidays or out of holidays or into a different role at work or going in back to school or a different school, all those kind of points can be a challenge. And I think it's always good to just stop and to think about what are the habits and what are the disciplines that I have that help me stay close to God, and have some of those things slipped because we're transitioning from one stage to another. So again, on your sheet of paper, and we're not going to do this now because I think it would be good to take these sheets away with us and to spend a little bit of time over the next few days thinking about this at home and maybe praying and asking God to speak to us. But there are two bits at the top. So there's one, what is God asking me to do? It's always good. If we're not sure what God is asking us to do at a particular stage in our lives, it's always good to stop and to pause and to invite God to speak to us and let us know what it is that we should be doing. And then in the blue blob, what routines and habits help me get closer to God? And so, but not just think about what those are, but have they slipped, or where are they going to fit as I go into this next stage in my life? Where are they going to fit? How am I going to build them in? So that's something to take away and to think about. I'm going to pray, and then Sharon's going to lead us in our last couple of songs. So let's pray.